Greetings everybody, welcome back to the landscape. Composition is something that features quite a lot on this channel. Sometimes it does bother me. Sometimes I think, no, do you know what? Go with it. And this is one of those occasions. Our modern digital cameras can do lots of things. But the one thing that it can't help you with is what's in your frame. That all comes from you. What you can see in the decisions that you make, the focal length that you choose to use, etc., etc. Generally in the landscape, I'm trying very hard to say something, put across a story, a suggestion, an idea, something like that. So everything that makes up my composition needs to contribute to that notion. And as a consequence, everything that's within my frame has the space it needs to contribute to the idea or the suggestion or the story. So what I'm going to do is, I think you can see it over my shoulder, I'm going to use this very well photographed tree as a metaphor, I suppose, to help me demonstrate to you all that there are some very basic, straightforward principles that we can all follow that will actually make a huge difference to our compositions when we're framing up objects or scenes in our cameras. Now, it's quite a bright, sunshiny day today, so I am, when you look at the back of the camera, it will be in black and white because basically black and white suits the day. I've also got a polarizer on in order to take some glare off the water, which you can probably hear behind me. And I've also put a red filter in front just in order to punch up the contrast in the scene a little bit. So just bear that in mind when you're looking at the back of the camera. So right, let's get behind the camera. Let's have a look at our wee tree. And what I will start off with is I will show you the chosen composition, and then what I'll try and do is muck around with that composition and show you what I wouldn't do in order to let that little tree tell the story that it's telling. Right, let's get behind the camera. Okie dokie, so we are behind the camera. I'm just going to brighten the scene quite significantly so that you can see it. And there is my chosen composition. Note that the tree has space to tell its own story. There's nothing interfering with it. I guess critically could do with maybe a little bit more space above, maybe just fractionally, no more than that. But rather than it just appearing from the side of the frame, you actually do have some of this rock face. If I actually just do that, hopefully you can see the impact of that. Now the tree just appears out the corner of the frame or the side of the frame. That just doesn't look right. So something like so that you can see where the tree is coming from. Now if I keep rotating, hopefully you can see that there is another tree here, and because you can't see where it starts, I don't know, it just looks irritating. So I have deliberately found a spot and deliberately moved the frame so that that tree doesn't appear. Therefore this one has all the space it needs. You know, it's obvious what is it that you're trying to say. You're trying to tell the story of this plucky little tree sticking out of a lump of rock with the landscape beyond. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lift the camera up, and I'm going to do it very deliberately. Let me just darken it down a little bit. And what I want you to do is pay attention to that hillside that you can see in the distance. Oh. So here we go. Right, ignore the tree on the right. But now the elbow of our little tree now sticks into that hill. That hill is part of the story. The hill tells us about the notion of the landscape and the sort of landscape that this tree is in, that it's mountainous and rugged and blah blah blah. So having that tree go up into the hillside, that's just wrong. You can't do that. That tree needs to have all the space it needs around it in order for it to say what it says in the landscape. Everything else contributes to the story. Now, also compositionally, the line of the water comes in from the left. If you follow the line, it then goes up the rock and then over to the tree, or you can go up the rock and then across the landscape. Note that I've been very, very careful to have the slope of the land coming down into the frame. That's very deliberate. I'm trying to encourage the eye to do that, not the eye to do that. I want to try and keep the viewer inside this frame and not actually move outside it. Now, some of you are going to say, well, why don't I just zoom in on that tree? Which, yeah, I suppose I could do that. But then hopefully you can see that the water down below, it's just there. It doesn't really say a huge amount about, I mean, it could be the sea as opposed to the seaside. I think actually including something of the shoreline, let me just recompose very quickly. Where's the shoreline gone? There it is. Including something of the shoreline does actually contribute to the story of where this thing is. And there's actually, I've only just noticed it, but there's a little rock just there as well. So that helps to add to the context within which our subject, our actor, is placed. I've deliberately leveled the camera. There's nothing worse than having sloping horizons, especially when you're dealing with water. And then from a focus point of view, I've focused right on the side of this tree. In looking at the tree, this bit and this bit are more or less on the same plane, but this piece of the tree actually comes forward towards us. So if I just refocus that quickly, like so, I've chosen an aperture of f4 just to give us a little bit of depth of focus up there. If this is slightly soft or the landscape is slightly soft, it doesn't matter. Hopefully, because the tree is sharp, that's where the viewer's eye goes. Everything else supports the story that this little tree is actually trying to say in the landscape. Things like that I do these days without thinking, but it's something that I had to learn from critique, learn from listening to other people. It's not something that you can do overnight. It is definitely something you learn from experience. But once you get it right and you come away with a result like that, it's well, personally, I think there's no substitute for it. One of the other things that I actually do is do what's called a boundary check. Come on, where are you? So I always look around the edge of the frame looking for distractions. And on the subject of frames, I'm just going to change the frame size. So I've been very, very deliberate with a square. So if we go for 3x2 and go that way, I think the tree gets a bit lost. All right, you've got a lot more land, but I think the strength of the tree and the land, they maybe compete with each other. 16x9 isn't necessarily going to work. So I think a 1x1 works perfectly, because a square is naturally a great way to represent a subject. And that's what we have, a subject. And that's why I chose a square for this particular tree. Composition, it's one of those things that I was going to say it's difficult to teach. It's not difficult to teach. I think sometimes it's difficult to retain, and most crucially retain why. On my landscape photography workshops, composition is probably the most popular topic. When I say to people, what do you want to get out of the day? Composition. So there's definitely, people are crying out to want to know how to do it. And I think you can look in books and you can look in magazines, but there is no substitute for being out here and doing it for real, and then making some mistakes, understanding those mistakes, and then choosing what to do about them. So, against that backdrop, I really hope this video's been useful to somebody. Like I said when I was doing it, I almost don't give it a second thought anymore. But at the time that I was, cutting my teeth, so to speak, out in the landscape, I listened to what people said to me. I used to write it down and almost have a sort of a checklist. Check this, check that, check the other. And that worked for me. It might work for you. I don't know. But I think the key thing, if you're going to take one thing away from this video, the key thing to take away is to work to allow everything in your frame to have the space that it needs to tell the story that you're trying to tell, and fill your frame with that story. Don't allow anything to distract. I think that's the key thing to take away from what it is I've tried to show you today. Right, to stop me from rambling, I'm going to stop talking and rambling. Like I say, I hope it's been useful to somebody. If you like landscape photography and you're not a subscriber, do consider becoming a subscriber to my channel. It's free and you can unsubscribe at any time. If you have liked this video, please give it a like on YouTube. It's gratefully appreciated, and it's useful for me to know what content lands and maybe what content doesn't. Right, until we're back out in the landscape again, everybody, please stay well, stay safe, keep out of trouble, and I shall see you again soon. Bye-bye for now.